So she believed that her nephew had these demons inside of him that she had to eliminate. Plus, she also believed that she could reincarnate him when the full moon came up later on that evening. So there was an 18-year-old schoolgirl. She started making some odd comments to her family, for example, chastising them for watching smut on TV, even though they were watching their usual family sitcom. She started listening to different music, like chanting music instead of her usual pop music. She started wearing sort of odd clothes, but nobody realized how unwell she was actually getting. What happened was that she was babysitting her 3-year-old nephew one day, which she'd done many times before, and she ended up smothering him and killing him. In her mind, she was suffering from these delusions, so she believed that her nephew had these demons inside of him that she had to eliminate. Plus, she also believed that she could reincarnate him when the full moon came up later on that evening. So Yasmin's mum comes home to the family home. It takes her a while to realise that this little child is dead because she just assumed he was sleeping. Obviously, there's a massive panic when she finds out and she calls the police. And Yasmin kept acting in a very bizarre manner and kept making these odd statements. For example, saying things like, when the full moon comes, you will believe and you will feel foolish, and you need to stop flooding the streets with drugs and start spreading them with love. So just these very generic, nonsensical statements. She was then remanded to prison, obviously, which is where I assessed her. And I have to say, it was a really challenging assessment because she was very closed down, she was very defensive, she was very guarded. Because I learned later on she was extremely paranoid at that time, but she wouldn't really let on. So I managed to convince the Ministry of Justice to transfer her over to the medium secure forensic psychiatric unit that I was working in at the time. And there wasn't a long period of time between her admission and her murder trial. It was only about 6 weeks. And during that time, we had to force her to take antipsychotic medication, which she didn't want to do because she lacked insight, so she didn't think she needed medication. I managed to entice some subtle symptoms out of her, so she would ask these bizarre questions about religion, bearing in mind that she never used to be religious previously. So she was asking me things like to print out all the information that I could find on the internet about reincarnation. And then when I'd ask her why she asked me this, she would shut down and deny it. So I managed to make an argument that I think she had schizoaffective disorder. Schizoaffective disorder is like a mixture between schizophrenia and a mood disorder. So I believe she had these delusional beliefs about reincarnation, about demons in her nephew, plus she had this disinhibition that came from mania, which is a mood disorder. So upon my evidence, she was facing a murder charge and life imprisonment, which is what the prosecution wanted. But I managed to convince the judge that instead it'd be more appropriate for her to be sent for long-term rehabilitation back to the medium secure unit. The first step was to medicate her for her psychotic symptoms, and that took several months. In fact, it took about over a year, I'd say, altogether. And for that whole period of time, Yasmin was convinced that she hadn't done anything wrong. She didn't believe people when they told her that her nephew was dead. But eventually the medication stopped those delusional beliefs, and then, as you'd imagine, reality came sort of crashing into her, and she finally realised the consequences of her actions. And then, as you'd expect, she went into a deep, deep depression, so we had to treat that through therapy, through antidepressants. So the reason that this case sticks out in my mind is for a number of factors. Firstly, obviously, the absolutely horrific, shocking nature of what she did, particularly in the context of the fact that there was very little in terms of background risk factors. So Yasmin had never committed any violence before. She'd never had any signs of mental illness before. And I have to say, it's extremely unusual for this kind of presentation. Usually people escalate over time. It's very unusual that somebody would do something so massively, horrifically violent the very first time they were mentally unwell. I suppose another reason that this was so emotional for me was interacting with her family. So part of Yasmin's eventual therapy was trying to bond that fractured relationship that she had with her family members, including her own brother, who was the father of the child that got killed. And I would sit in a room during this family therapy and listen to their discussions. So yeah, this is a case that will absolutely stay with me for the rest of my career. Let me know what you think in the comments section below, and obviously do not forget to subscribe.